What's up everybody, I'm Jesse, or GameOverJesse as you all may know me, and today I have a very awesome guest with me, Nathaniel. You know him from Zelda Informer, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for those that may not know who you are.
Yes, I am Nathaniel Rumpel-Jantz, the editor-in-chief at Zelda Informer. I've been doing that for 7 years, and I've been running Zelda sites for 18 years, so most of my life.
Yeah. And today we're here to talk to you all about the recent Zelda Wii U rumors that we've gotten leaked and sort of Nintendo's plans for E3 with the reveal of the NX and their mobile games and everything. So let's start off with the 3 rumors that got revealed or leaked yesterday. What are your thoughts on them? Because some of them are heavily debated topics in the Zelda community. There's some people that say if Zelda gets voice acting, then it'll ruin the entire franchise for them, but then there's people that support the idea. So where do you kind of fall on this, and what are your thoughts with Nintendo evolving the series this way?
It's been a long time coming. I think when it comes to video games, there are some games that almost cling to tradition as a fault. A lack of voice acting in 2016 in a major AAA game is baffling. And we're not just talking about like a racing game or something where voice acting really doesn't need it. It doesn't matter. We're talking about an action-adventure game with tons and tons of dialogue, with cutscenes that could have paragraphs upon paragraphs of dialogue. And my issue with, especially the 3D Zelda games, is every time there was a major impactful cutscene, some of that impact was lost because the whole scene would pause for you to read text.
Right.
And that really took me out of the moment. And I didn't like that. Now, I understand some of the counter-arguments like Princess Zelda, Ganondorf. Some of these characters have been around a long time, and a lot of people have their own imaginations for what their voices are in their heads. That's great. But there's a lot of different Zeldas, a lot of different Links. I know there's so far only really been one Ganondorf, but it's one of those things that I think voice acting shouldn't be viewed as necessarily a negative. Now I know Nintendo themselves does not have a good reputation when it comes to voice acting, because I think the only one of their first voice acting games ever was Metroid Other M, and I know people hated the voice acting in that, especially for Samus. And I didn't hate the voice acting as much as a lot of those people did, but it seemed their voice actor for Samus kind of made her seem emotionless, and that might have been what they were going for, so it actually might have totally fit the character that they designed, and you just didn't like that character design,
right,
with the personality. But the rumor itself states specifically that Link would not be voice acted.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest worry that anyone would have is that the silent protagonist idea would be gone. So if you're someone who likes to project yourself onto Link, if you view Link as an avatar, that's still going to be there. They're not giving him a voice. You are still in your head, or whatever's going on, you are the voice of Link still. Right. So if they're doing voice acting, they're doing it right. Now there's 2 different ways they can approach voice acting, and I actually saw HMK bring this up when he posted about the news himself. And it was that they could have a spoken Hylian language that you could translate, to understand yourself, but in the game that's where it is, and it still ends up having the text boxes.
Right, and we've seen, sorry to interrupt you, but we've seen Nintendo sort of experiment with that before. I believe Midna and Fi, or Fi, however you want to pronounce her name, spoke in their own garbled language. Yep.
So it's entirely possible that that's just what they mean. That now all the characters will have their own unique voice in that way, but it's still going to sound like gibberish to us. But it might not actually be gibberish. It could be its own made-up language. That's not what I want to see, though. I want the full, impactful, actual voice acting. And I want them, if they're going to do it, they need to do it right. And to me, I know in Nintendo of America, they tend to, like for Star Fox, they tend to use their localization team at Nintendo Treehouse as also the voice actors. Yeah. Most of them are not professional voice actors. They didn't join the Treehouse to do that. They joined to translate. So it would be nice if they decided, Zelda's a huge franchise. We can't just we can't just grab in-house people for this. We're gonna let's go out and let's grab real voice actors that can actually bring some character to it, and that's what makes this rumor almost slightly unbelievable, because they'd have to do that for every language they want to translate it into.
Right.
But that's what I want to see. There are so many games that have done it right. I hate bringing it up because I don't think it's a fair comparison to Zelda, but the voice acting in The Witcher 3 was like perfect.
Yeah.
And there's as many examples as there are of bad voice acting. There are very good voice acting in games, and if they can figure it out, and they're a much smaller company than Nintendo, CD Projekt Red, I don't see how Nintendo can't be given a benefit of the doubt to get it right with Zelda. Now, there's always going to be the case that you might not like the accent used or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean the quality of the voice acting is bad. You just have a personal preference.
Right, and it was an interview or a statement released by Aonuba, I believe, after Hyrule Warriors came out, where he mentioned that he was kind of surprised. I'm not quoting this exactly, but he was surprised by the fan reactions and how positively the cutscenes from Hyrule Warriors were taken, and he was going to implement something like the Hyrule Warriors cutscenes for Zelda Wii U. Do you think this in any way influenced how voice acting came to it, since with larger cutscenes and stuff, you would expect it to have voice acting?
You know, obviously, I think cutscenes are when we think about voice acting, we have to consider, why does voice acting matter? You know, it's not just about taking the text off the screen. It's about making you as a person, when you're playing the game, feel like you're in this living, breathing world. And every time you read text, you're kind of taken out of that world to read what someone inside that world is thinking or saying.
Right.
And cutscenes are obviously the biggest downfall of that, because a cutscene is literally like a little movie you're watching that is being paused. And in Hyrule Warriors, they didn't really have voice acting in Hyrule Warriors. They had a narrator, and that's a purposeful choice just based on the Warrior series, that they like having their narrators. So, you know, I don't know that it really had much of an influence. I think the high quality CGI that they used, especially in the Wii U version, that's, I think, more so what he's referring to, is that they've always, if you look back on previous Zelda games, they've kind of always used the in-game graphics and the models, and kind of just made their cutscenes around that, so it seemed really seamless. But in Hyrule Warriors, there was a big difference between the gameplay and the cutscenes. The cutscenes were like, I mean, you're watching professional CGI level there. And I think he was talking more about the quality of the presentation of those cutscenes. And, you know, it's almost kind of like, man, fans are loving these high quality CGI cutscenes. We can't let a side game outdo our own Zelda series. We need to step our game up.
Right.
So I think that's what he's more talking. You know, the narrator's interesting. I don't really want to see a narrator in, you know, Zelda U at all, unless, you know, the only part of the game that makes sense to maybe narrate, if they're going to have voice acting in the whole game anyways, would be, say, the pre-story. The preamble, when you boot up the game and it's telling you the legend, you know, kind of like, you know, when it's going through the storyboard, like in the Wind Waker, and they could narrate that and have a narrator for it. But I don't really think the voice acting aspect had anything to do with Hyrule Warriors, just because there really wasn't voice acting.
Right.
Again, it was a lot of text, and I think that actually worked against Hyrule Warriors, because you're in the midst of this frantic battle, and you have all these little text pop-ups from these characters trying to give you information, and, you know, are you really taking the time to read that as you're getting your butt whooped by whatever you're fighting? So I think just a lot gets lost. A lot of the impact of what's happening can get lost when you're just reading text.
Right. Especially with text, there's a lot of people that just mash through it because they don't want to spend the time reading, when they could just have it spoken to them by the characters.
Well, and plus there's always intent. One thing that text, and this is a common problem on the internet, when people are writing comments, is they can't always tell if you're being sarcastic. They can't always tell what the tone is of what you're saying. There's all these hidden meanings people read into the text that are in the game, or what characters have said, which is really interesting and really intriguing, but that might not have anything to do with what the developers intended. And we don't know that because they can't put intonation into a text.
Right.
So it's a lot harder to convey, and it's really interesting how novelists and actual authors and writers are able to do that through text in their own books. But again, Nintendo, they're not hiring professional novelists. I mean, Eiji Nomo himself just admitted he wrote a lot of the lines of text in Skyward Sword. He admitted this a couple months ago.
Yeah,
that he wrote a lot of the dialogue, and he doesn't have a journalism degree. He doesn't have a writing degree. He's a programmer. So
even in the Wind Waker, he mentioned whenever he was being interviewed that he wrote a lot of the lines from the King of Red Lions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's one of those that they're not hiring like a professional author to do it, to maybe convey that a bit better. And that's fine. I don't know the video games necessarily need that if it's a heavily gameplay focused game like Zelda usually is. But that also means that if you're including lines of text that you want to be impactful in a certain way, you might only get that impact if you can include intonation, which would mean which would mean voice acting. So I've always wanted voice acting. I've been arguing for it for the last 15 years. I didn't think they were ever going to do it. I hope that these rumors are true and that it is happening. And I hope that Zelda fans, even if you don't like it, you are really traditionalist, as I've seen a lot of fans of Zelda Informer are very traditionalist. I just hope you're willing to give it a chance before you just write it off as this terrible thing. If the voice acting ends up being really, really bad, and it's just people at the treehouse who did it, and their voices don't match the characters or the personalities of the characters at all, I get it. It's cool. Yeah. Whatever. Nintendo, don't do it again unless you can do it right. But
I think since this is such a controversial thing, and Nintendo should know that by now, they should include the option to just mute it for those people that don't want it. That way, if you don't want it, you don't have to listen to it. If you do, then
there's some games even that have voice acting, they do include the ability to turn on the text. So you could turn on text boxes if you want, or just like when you watch certain movies, you can turn on closed captioning and all that stuff. So I think if they do it, there's going to be an option to turn on text so you can read it. Whether or not they're going to have the ability to in turn turn off the voices, I don't know. That's not common with a lot of games of voice acting to do that. Probably because they spent so much money on voice acting, they don't want you turning that off. But I don't know. I'm really excited by it. The fact that this rumor comes from a fairly credible person. This is the first time that I actually have a small belief in me that voice acting is going to be a thing in Zelda. Like E3 could not come sooner, man.
Right. And moving on to the next rumor, which I think is kind of obvious.
Oh, okay.
Zelda Wii U
covering the obvious one.
Yeah, Zelda Wii U coming to the NX and the Wii U. I've been thinking this ever since maybe 2-3 years passed and we didn't get the Zelda Wii U game. I thought, well, they're just going to hold it over, release it at the end of the console cycle and at the beginning of the next. And I think it would be a great way to boost sales and kind of push sales forward for the NX, because most people bought their Wii U's for Zelda Wii U. And if they can put that game on the NX and add some additional features or something that the NX can offer that the Wii U can't, then I think that would be a good way to drive early sales for the NX, because a lot of people could just return their Wii U's and give another $100-$200 and get an NX and then get the game that they were originally wanting for the Wii U. So what are your thoughts on this? Was it an obvious no-brainer for you, or is it...
I think, for starters, anyone who I want to say thinks more logically about things, ever since the game was delayed last year and had the big announcement, the logical conclusion was that part of this delay was also going to mean going to another console. That doesn't necessarily mean that was the reason for the delay, more of a byproduct of it, realizing that it's going to be released a year later, and if the NX is so close, you don't want to pull another Skyward Sword where no one's buying the console anymore, and then you release a game, then you release a new console that doesn't have a big launch game for it. And plus they saw the success of Twilight Princess on the Wii and how that helped the launch of the Wii. Obviously Wii Sports was a big success, so the Wii probably would have did well anyways, but a lot of the core Nintendo fans might not have bought the Wii right away. It would have just been the casuals if it wasn't for Twilight Princess.
Right. And there. I think a lot of the casual gamers were introduced to the Wii because of the hardcore gamers that...
Yeah, and I think a lot of there are a lot of Zelda fans today that their first game was Twilight Princess on the Wii, and they didn't buy the Wii to play Twilight Princess. It was just one of the few games out at the time when their parents bought the Wii. So
Right.
well, let's go buy that game and see what's going on. So I think it's logical. It's at this point, Nintendo would be stupid not to release it on NX. And I'm not saying that to punish people who bought the Wii U just for Zelda U. I don't even know if a majority of Wii U owners bought it for that, because I think a majority of Wii U owners are perfectly happy playing their Mario Makers and their Splatoon, their Mario Kart and Smash and Pikmin 3 and all the great games that the Wii U actually has a pretty strong library. But there are some people I know, especially the Zelda Informer, they've been very keen to let me know. They own 0 Wii U games. They own a Wii U. They bought it just for Zelda U. And they are going to be very mad that if it goes to NX. And I've always been one of those people that I don't care about platforms. I care about games. And the Zelda franchise, if you kind of look at the history of it, ever since Twilight Princess, it's been going down in sales with every single release.
Right.
Some of this is because the hardware since Twilight Princess has got less and less popular. Some of it's also just because the Zelda series keeps changing with every single release and splitting the fan base up more and more. So Zelda needs Zelda U to be a success. They spent 5 years on this game. It's one of the most expensive games they've probably ever made in the history of their whole company. They have a lot invested to it. And if you just want it to release on Wii U, if you're one of those people like no NX, it has to be just Wii U, you are literally asking for them to never make another 3D Zelda game again. Because it is not going to sell enough copies on Wii U alone to justify how much they spent on it. And their last 3D Zelda game also did not meet their sales expectations. They expected at least 6 million, they announced, for Skyward Sword, and they only sold 3.5.
Yeah.
So they barely got over halfway through their
That really is terrible when you consider that when Twilight Princess launched, obviously it had more time to sell more copies, but when it launched, everyone was just buying their Nintendo Wiis. Hold on a second.
Sure.
My camera froze. Alright. So when people bought Twilight Princess for the first time early in the Wii cycle, they were just getting their Wii, probably got the two together. And it had a few years to grow, but it ended up selling the most compared to any of the other Zelda games. But when Skyward Sword launched, everyone already had a Wii. There was over 100 million units out, if I am remembering correctly.
Yeah, it was just under 100 million.
And to have that many units out and to have an attach rate so low for Skyward Sword, which was a game that they put so much work with the Motion Plus controls and trying to change the formula of the Zelda series, because I think that was the first title that they made to where they were trying to make it a little bit different, and to see that not go as well as they could have, maybe that's why they're going back to the success of Twilight Princess, which they remarked that when you play Zelda Wii U that you'll be reminded of Twilight Princess, and maybe that's not just because it's going to be on the NX and the Wii U, but maybe it has something to do with that game as well. Who knows?
Yeah, there's the big thing to remember for those that are upset, especially if this rumor is a fact, all these rumors are facts, and if you're upset that it's going to be on NX and Wii U, is that the number one thing we as Zelda fans should care about is that we're going to continue to get Zelda games. And unfortunately for the Wii U, and I say unfortunately because there are a lot of good games for it, it is not a product that is appealed. So it is not sold well. If Nintendo knew that if they released Zelda U, it was going to become the best-selling game on the whole system, they might keep it that way then, because I think Mario Kart 8 I think is the best-selling at 6 or 7 million.
Yeah.
And if they knew it was going to be around there, that's great. That's one of the best-selling Zelda games of all time. But they are not silly. They know that's not the case. They might see half of those sales. They might say 2 to 3 million, and that's not enough for a game that they might be north of $100 million invested into this game by now, which is not unheard of. It could be even higher than that. And it seems that Nintendo wants to make Zelda games like this, but they need the audience to show that it could support that. In addition, and this is beyond just the health of the Zelda series, the NX itself needs killer launch titles. If it's coming this year, it needs killer launch titles. And the big thing, I think the worst thing they did with Twilight Princess, and I think this is honestly, what Wii U owners might be fearing is that if there's a dual release, it's coming to NX first. So it can push the NX and then come out on Wii U later in another limited run like they did with the Twilight Princess GameCube version. And I think Nintendo learned a lesson from that they don't need to do that. They can release them both at the same time on both platforms. And if people still have their Wii U's and they don't plan to upgrade right away, they can still get their Zelda game.
Yeah.
And if people do want to upgrade right away, they can also still get their Zelda game. Yeah. So I don't think they don't need to be as drastic as that. Plus, I think they have a better launch lineup plan this time around. They must, because they have several studios who have games that aren't announced yet. So there's got to be some better launch titles coming. Plus, there's some rumors with NX with third-party support. But yeah, so I think it's essential that it releases on both. I think if it only released on Wii U, you might be looking at the last 3D Zelda game for a very, very, very time. Now, I'm not talking like 5 years till the next one. I mean, like, they might just pull a Metroid on 3D Zelda games and just stop them entirely.
Right. All right. So a quick question about this rumor before moving on to the final rumor. With its launch on the Wii U and the NX, obviously whenever Twilight Princess did that on the GameCube and Wii, there was 3 major differences between the two. The GameCube was standard 4:3 aspect ratio.
Yes.
The Wii version was 16:9. It had motion controls, and then the map was flipped. What kind of differences do you think will come to the Wii U and the NX version, if any? Because my personal opinion is that maybe the Zelda Wii U version will have 720p at 30 frames a second, and then with the NX obviously being more powerful, they can bump it up to 1080p, and it'll just be a resolution difference more than anything.
I think it's not going to be any significant changes. I mean, it depends on what you define as significant. There's obviously probably going to be a resolution bump. Because why wouldn't you do that? If you have more powerful hardware, you should at least bump the resolution.
Yeah, because if sorry to interrupt you, but if you
it's okay.
If you didn't bump up the resolution or add any major features, and the NX is backwards compatible, as most Nintendo consoles are backwards compatible with their predecessor, or at least recently with the Wii U and the Wii, and then the Wii and the GameCube.
Yep.
If the NX follows that, then what's stopping people from just buying the Wii U version and playing it on their NX if there's nothing else that the NX version offers?
I think, well, this is totally different speculation. I don't think the NX is going to be backwards compatible. I think they're going to change architecture with it, and that's going to mean the only way they can do that is to do what they did with the Wii U, and that's literally put a Wii U in the system, and to me that would just be a mistake. You know, as awesome as it is that the Wii U has backwards compatibility, you have to boot it up into a totally different mode, go back and forth. It's kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to do that at all, and I especially don't think they're going to do it because I think they're going to release like remastered packs of the best Wii U games, like a Smash Bros. NX, you know, Smash 4 NX that has all the DLC. I think they're going to take huge advantage of the fact that most of their games on the Wii U had DLC, and they're going to combine all the DLC into one big NX package and try to sell you another full price version on NX, especially for those who own the NX that don't want to go back and buy old Wii U games, or might have a hard time finding them because a lot of stores don't keep big stock of Wii U games right now.
Right.
So that's a totally different side. I think for this game, 2 things are going to happen. One, the resolution and frame rate might both get bumped because they can. Zelda won't be negatively impacted by 60 FPS, and it won't be negatively impacted by 1080p. And chances are the Wii U version is probably, if it is 1080p, then it's definitely 30 FPS. If it's 720p, it's probably still 30 FPS because the world is just that big. And if they're including any sort of draw distance in that world, which if that footage that we've seen so far is on a Wii U system, then they have included draw distance.
Yeah.
A pretty significant amount of it. Then there's no way in heck they're pulling that off on what is comparable to last generation hardware at 60 FPS. That's just not happening.
Yeah. It's much closer to PS3 and 360 than it is the newer consoles.
Yeah. So it's, you know, and I could see how some Wii U owners would be upset by that, but then at the same time I say, look, you were always getting 720p 30 FPS anyway, so I don't know what you're mad. Because a better version exists, you should be happy. That means sometime down the line you can upgrade and play a better version of the game. I don't know why that should make you angry, but and I think the other thing that might happen, and this is all speculation because we don't know anything about the NX concrete info. We have some leaks and stuff, but even the leaks don't really tell us much. They give us ballpark, like maybe it's as powerful as the PlayStation 4. But what we don't know is what the input is, how we're going to be controlling games on the system. Is there going to be multiple controllers? Is there going to be another touchscreen? A lot of stuff we don't know. So assuming that there is not a touchscreen packed in with the system, that means the base control scheme is probably going to change because there won't be like a Wii U gamepad attached to it. So you might still have, you know, like if it's a controller that has like the one patent where, you know, there's no face buttons, it could be a totally different control scheme then. It could be all done with swipes on the touch screen, or who knows how that would handle it. So that's something that might change. Now, if there are face buttons on the controller and all that stuff, then the base controls will be the same, but some of how you do things will be different. Like you won't be, you know, they show before you looked up the gamepad and you like tap on it and you set a beacon or whatever. That probably won't be a thing on, or at least not in the same way. It might be like you open your mini map on the screen, then you navigate to a spot, and then you hit a button on it. You know, there's multiple ways to do what they've shown. So I think those are really the only changes you're going to see. I don't think Nintendo's going to be like, look, we're going to add all this new content and do all this different stuff, and it's going to be way, way, way better on the NX. Like, no, most of the development of this game was on Wii U. Like, people got to remember, if there's been any dev time put on this for NX, it's been 6 months, maybe a year at most. And they are not looking to fully take advantage of everything the NX can do. They just want a crisp-looking, well-running Zelda game on there at launch.
Right.
So, just like the Twilight Princess before, most of its dev time was on GameCube, and the only real big addition, in my opinion, was the 16:9.
Yeah.
Their excuse for flipping the world was ridiculous. It didn't matter what hand you hold the dang Wiimote in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I personally thought if they kept Link with the sword in the left hand, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. It wasn't even
one-to-one motion controls, so there was like no reason for it. At least in Skyward Sword, like I get it, most of your players are right-handed supposedly, but even then, it's really not that big a deal.
Right. All right. So moving on to the final rumor.
Do we have to talk about this one?
Yeah, I think a lot of people
I know it's
love
one
to
of
get
the
your
rumors.
opinion. All right. So it's the second rumor, but on this it's the third. You'll be able to play as a male or female. Now, this comes off of a lot of people getting excited over hope of Linkle being introduced to Hyrule Warriors, and then I believe Aonuma or someone made a comment about
it was Aonuma.
Yeah, about it would be interesting to use her in a future game where they would keep the option open, or they would think about it or something like that.
Yeah, he wanted to see how fans reacted.
And then whenever Zelda Wii U was first shown off, a lot of people made comments that Link looked different, or he looked like a girl or something like that. And then Aonuma made the comment that he never specifically said that was Link.
Explicitly said.
Yeah. And then later on in an interview, he said that while he said that, he never said that it wasn't Link. So he's kind of
he said it's odd. Well, yeah, he said I was kind of toying with you because I never said it was Link, and I don't think it was something about how he doesn't think the look of the character ultimately matters because it's just a projection of the player, and that's where the whole avatar versus character thing started. And then he said, but of course it was Link. We can't show off a Zelda game without it being Link. Right. Was basically how he surmised it. So he's like, duh, of course it's Link, but you know, you really shouldn't care about that.
Right.
And that's really the biggest credence, I think, to there being a gender option. And something he might have been hinting at way, way, way back then was like, stop caring about this stuff because I don't care about it. And I don't think you should care about it. Yes, it's Link. We're always going to advertise our game with Link, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be playing as Link, or that you're always going to be playing as a male Link. Yeah. And he didn't want to give that all away. If this is true, then that just means he didn't want to give it away back then.
Right.
And I think if this is true, this isn't just, you know, a decision made recently. It would have been something made a long time ago for there to be a gender option. So, you know, I know some fans some Zelda Informer fans, if you're watching this or listening, you might be thinking, "Oh man, Zelda Informer got their way. They influenced Nintendo." No, we didn't. If they made this decision, it was long before we ever talked about gender. All right. Yeah. And I hate talking about it just because I know it infuriates so many fans on both sides. The ones that want it, the ones that don't want it, and all the arguing and the traditionalism. I don't think it negatively impacts the game. I don't know that it positively impacts the game either. I'm kind of at a point where I don't think gender ultimately matters in the Zelda series. It doesn't matter to me if Princess Zelda's a guy. It doesn't matter to me if Link's a girl. It doesn't matter to me if Ganondorf is some sentient transsexual. It doesn't matter to me.
Right. As long as the gameplay and
yeah, it's all about the gameplay to me. It's all about the gameplay and the story. Like, Zelda's not a series that's all about these deep, intricate love stories. And generally, love stories is where gender kind of matters, because like you find out one character is really into females. Okay, cool. Well, that'd be really weird if that character was into a female who turned out to be a guy.
Yeah.
And Nintendo usually doesn't get that deep with relationships, anyways. They kind of want to stay away from the political spectrum. Outside of Tamagotchi Life, they do some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and there was a recent comment on one of my videos where someone was furiated about this news, and he said Zelda games are about Link, a male, saving the Princess Zelda, who is female. And I didn't reply to it, but the first thing that popped in my head was Majora's Mask, where it is Link as a male, but Zelda's only in it for like 10 seconds as a cutscene, and you're not trying to save her, you're just trying to save Hyrule, where Zelda is off completely safe in Hyrule. Mm-hmm. Or you're not trying to save Hyrule, you're trying to save Termina, sorry.
Yeah, and it's not even like Link's Awakening obviously is another example where Zelda's not in the game at all. But even in some of the games Zelda's in, it's not always about saving her. Now, sometimes it is. Your adventure in A Link to the Past starts by Zelda telepathically talking to you and asking for your help. So you feel like you're trying to save her. Okay, great. But a lot of other games aren't really necessarily built around saving her. She's kind of a byproduct. I'd even argue in Twilight Princess, you're not really in it to save Zelda. You don't know who she is. You only meet her after you're a wolf through Midna, and you don't even feel bad for Zelda. You're just, she's just there. She's chilling in a castle. She looks unharmed. The only time you feel bad for her is when she risks her life to save Midna, or supposedly risks her life to save Midna. And even then, it's some magic and some stuff that, as a player, you don't understand. Yeah. And it's kind of one of those, the game's not about her. You're not there to save Zelda. Zelda doesn't look like she's in danger. Midna's in danger. The Twilight Realm's in danger. The people of Hyrule are in danger from the Twilight Realm. So there's even a lot in the more traditional Zelda games where Zelda isn't necessarily the driving force behind what you're doing. Now, obviously, the series was founded on the idea of Save the Princess. The Legend of Zelda is all about Save Zelda. Zelda 2 is all about waking Zelda up.
Yeah,
so there definitely is, I guess, some traditional backbone to the series where it's about a male Link saving a female princess. But over the years, that just hasn't always been the case. So I don't think it matters. And I don't know if Link was female, how that changes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is even though you are Link saving the princess, most of the games Link and Zelda don't necessarily have a relationship with each other, other than friendship.
And in Zelda 2, they kiss, right, or whatever. It's inferred that they kiss behind the drop down. Like, okay, so say Link's a female and they kissed. Aren't we in a society where we're accepting of those kind of relationships anyways? So like, why would that matter?
And if they did add an option to choose a female Link, something that I've talked about in several of my videos is if they gave this option, then it would be a perfect way to sort of sneak in multiplayer, to where they mentioned that they don't want you to think about Zelda Wii U as a standalone, single player experience. Yeah. And I mean, that could mean that they're just going to include Miiverse, like they have with Wind Waker. It's also possible they do something
that I think every Zelda fan should love. Because I think a lot of people, there's been talk about, whether you could choose to play as Link or choose to play as Linkle, as an example. Like, if this is just how he's going to incorporate Linkle into the series now or whatever. And arguments over, well, they're different characters. How can they be on the same quest? Maybe they're not on the same quest.
Right.
Maybe somehow, some way, they've made it where the character you choose takes you on a totally different journey. So it almost feels like you have two games in one world.
Right.
Yeah. And and I don't know, any Zelda fan could be upset about that. Then you have like multiple reasons to replay this game. Like crazy.
You have basically a second quest stacked.
Yeah, it would be like a second quest with a different character.
Yeah.
And it would actually logically make sense. Because obviously you would assume the character that isn't Link wouldn't be on the same quest that the chosen hero would.
And then another thing with Linkle, which a lot of people think that maybe it isn't Linkle, that it could be Aryll from, not necessarily Aryll from Wind Waker, but a version of Aryll towards
that fits the art style too.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that it could be her, or just her or Linkle, and I think a great way to do that is you can pick your male character or you can pick your female character, and if it isn't just simple Miiverse implementation, it is true multiplayer as we know it from other games, then maybe if you're out in the middle of a dungeon or something, then a second player can come in, pick up a controller, someone online can connect with you, and they can start playing as Linkle back in Kakariko Village or wherever, or they can spawn at the entrance of the dungeon and then make their way to you to help you out. I think
that would be really cool if, I think they're always going to have it so you can beat the main gist of the game by yourself because it's always been a single player game. But it'd be really cool if they included like specific side dungeons and items that you could only get if someone multiplayers with you. I'm sure someone will find a way to glitch the game to get through the dungeon by yourself. That's going to happen. Someone will figure that out. But that's not the way the game will intend it. So it'll be that's a really interesting idea. Again, that obviously all goes back to what Ijinomo, specifically stated that he wants to break conventions of Zelda.
Yeah.
And it being single player. Some people think that just meant Triforce Heroes, but
yeah, I think the multiplayer aspect of it is if they make it multiplayer, and again I've said this in several of my videos, they shouldn't make it like Triforce Heroes or Four Swords Adventures to where it's a multiplayer game built from the ground up, but you can, if you want, try to play it single player.
Yeah, it should be a single player with multiplayer aspects sprinkled in.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like New Super Mario Bros. It's a single player game.
Of course, they could just go total Zelda MMO style, and then I'll be really happy.
Yeah, and the thing with the going back to the topic of this part of it, the rumor specifically being a female Link, how do you think they would address that? Like, if you could have your wish,
the big thing about the rumors is, and I noted this when I posted about it at Zelda Informer, it does not specifically say it'll be a female Link. It just says there will be a gender option.
Okay, yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be male or female Link. That's the most obvious thing because then Nintendo wouldn't have to create a whole second character. And that's what really makes this a big unknown is, if people are upset that Link would change to a girl, well, we don't even know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if it does happen, okay, fine, be upset, I guess, if you want, but like you're never going to experience it. I'm guessing you're always going to choose male, so you're never going to experience it anyways. And that's always been kind of my big thing and why I've not necessarily supported gender options, but I've never really been against gender options because if you always play as a male Link, you're still going to play as your male Link and it's not going to matter to you. Yeah, maybe some live stream you like plays as a female, like, okay, then stop watching them if it upsets you so much.
Right.
That's a choice that player made that you don't like, so then just don't watch. So it's one of those that I've never had a problem with it. But again, I've also been like, because I don't have a problem with it, I also don't see the point in it because I don't think the gender matters enough to even bother to put the options in the first place. I think it's like a waste of development resources. But if it's going to be in there, great. Some people are going to be very happy about it. I think the hardcore fans that are upset about it are going to get over it. Especially if it becomes a norm moving forward. Like if it just becomes like when Pokemon started doing it and now they just start doing it with every game.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's just something you're going to have to accept. I mean,
that's what I was thinking.
I think the art style change in the Wind Waker did more harm to the series than this gender option thing.
Yeah. But I think the simplest and easiest way to do it, to make people that don't want to play as a female Link thinking that they're going to be missing out on something, is to make it, as you mentioned with Pokemon, to where it's Professor Oak simply being, are you a boy, are you a girl? and then you just pick, and instead of saying he, the game will say she, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's all these different ways they can approach it. It's just going to be, I just hope within the story itself, if this is true, that they find a way to explain the backstory and explain everything in a way that works for both genders. That they don't really, they built it around, not where they didn't really just build it around a male Link like they've always done, and then shoehorned in the gender option as kind of like, people keep talking about this, let's put it in there. And then, they just change the text from he to she, but they still, as an example, even though hero is a term that can be used for both boys and girls, it is more commonly used for boys. They don't forget to say something like hero or heroine during certain parts of the lore. It'll just be interesting, and it would be weird too if they did, like, say for some reason they do have a relationship in it, like let's say you are a descendant from, like in Twilight Princess, we know he's a blood relative. It'd be really weird if, like, they have some sort of descendant, or like you have a child or something, and the relationship that you had ended up, because of what gender you chose, ended up being a girl on girl relationship. How did you have a kid?
Right.
So it's one of those that, like, I just hope they make sure they're very careful about how they do it. They didn't kind of just toss it in there willy-nilly and not really go through every line of text and everything going on to make sure that it works correctly. Like, if there's a scene where Link takes his shirt off and sumo wrestles, like in Twilight Princess, and in both of them he looks like a dude, well, that's going to be a problem for people who chose female.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they approach this, assuming it's true. As I said, I really don't care. There's so many people that care about this. I know that, like, Josh from Really Freaking Clever, he is so for this and so mad at everyone against it. Darren at our site is kind of the same way. I just do not care. I think Zelda's going to be great with or without the options. I almost don't even think it's something worth talking about, but for some reason people like talking about it.
Yeah, I like talking about it to an extent, but I like seeing the opinions of others more and more, because I think the discussions that you can get from other people and seeing the reason behind wanting it or the reason behind not wanting it. Sometimes they have stupid answers, but a lot of people have...
Well, from what I've seen, the biggest reason to want it, and I give anyone who thinks this way all the benefit in the world, is that they feel Link is an avatar. And as an avatar that you project yourself onto. If you are a girl, it is easier to project yourself onto another female character. And I totally get that. It makes a heck of a lot of sense. But there's a lot of Zelda fans that don't view Link as an avatar. They view him as a character. And I think that's where a lot of the clashing comes. I don't even think the clashing is about a gender debate. I honestly think it's just about the avatar versus character debate that Nintendo themselves won't even end, because game to game they change who Link is. Some games he is a character. Other games he's totally an avatar. And that's the thing. I think if there is a gender option, then to me, in this game, it's clear the intent is for him to be an avatar.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it changes from games to games. Like, if you look at Ocarina of Time or something, he didn't really speak, so he didn't have a personality. But if you look at Skyward Sword, he had more of a personality in that game than any of the other games. Or at least that's what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. If you look at the progression and what you consider to be, like in the Wind Waker, he doesn't really talk, but he's full of expressions. So you get an idea of how he's feeling, and how he's feeling might not match what you're feeling. Like when you get launched in a barrel off a boat, you might be feeling, man, this is awesome, and he's scared out of his mind. So you know how Link is feeling. So it's kind of one of those that, and based on what Ajinoma said, the last time he talked about Link in reference to Zelda U was very clearly talking about him as an avatar, how we should stop caring about what he looked like because he's just an avatar. So I would say that, if nothing else, that in this particular game they're leaning towards this Link being an avatar. But again, if you really feel he's a character, that's great. None of us know anything about Zelda U to make any definitive decision on whether he's a character or an avatar, unless for some reason you don't know how to horseback ride. He knows how to horseback ride, therefore he's a character. If that's your logic, then I can't argue with you, I guess.
All right. Well, Nathan, I think that pretty much wraps it
Sure.
up. So I want to thank you for coming on and talking
no
about
problem.
this, and hopefully sometime in the future you can come back on. We can talk about more stuff if more
I
information
love talking
comes
about
out.
Nintendo and Zelda. So.
All right. Yeah. So for those again that may not know who you are, can you kind of fill them in and let them know if they want to find out more stuff about you? Where can they follow you or?
Sure.
Stuff
So again, I am the editor-in-chief of ZeldaInformer.com. Let me see. I am on Twitter. I don't use it too much, but I do check it every day. At Nate Jantz on Twitter. That's NateJanc. Yeah, you guys probably won't follow me anyways. I also have a news site that I started up called NintendoPrime.com. I'm on there pretty frequently, so if you ever want to get a hold of me, send me a PM on there. I will get back to you pretty much the same day. Yeah, you can email me, Nathan at ZeldaInformer.com. If you have any other questions, follow our YouTube channel, Zelda Informer on YouTube. We do a Zelda Inquiries discussion thing every single week. I have my Boss Man series. We're working on some top 10s and some other stuff. So, yeah, we're always bringing the Zelda, and I know that your viewers don't care, but this is my first year I'm ever going to E3, so I'm pumped that it's my first year involves Zelda U. I'm pretty excited about that.